Welcome back. You're watching The Money Show with me, Kavita Thapliyal. And now let's talk about planning to take a career break. If you are one of those individuals who right now wants to plan their career ahead or want to figure out as to what's the exact calling of their life, we have this special segment with you where we'll be having interesting people to talk about and help you draw this entire plan. We have Shilpa Bhaskar Gole, founder, NerdyBird Financial Wellnes, and we also have Aditya Narayan Mishra, Managing Director, CEO, Ciel HR Services. Good evening and welcome to the show. All right, so I know that this is a time where a lot of companies are actually resorting to layoffs, and many individuals are choosing at the same time to take a break in their career and figure out as to what they want to do next. It might not sound the right time to take a break, but then we also know a lot of people who, if at all, have been even laid off, want to really plan their next move. Aditya, if we just want to take a career break, do you think it's advisable to do it now, looking at the kind of fluctuation and the kind of uncertainty everywhere?
See, in my mind, anytime one needs to take a career break, anytime is a good time. As long as one is very clear that the passion of having taken alternate career or to start something is meaningfully and carefully chosen, and the financials to back up one's plans as well as one absence of the regular income stream is planned well. So anytime is a good time, even if now the external environment is volatile, uncertain. Um, I think there will be something or the other as an obstacle all the time. And I personally feel that uh, these obstacles are very macroeconomic, and once for individual context, they really don't make such a huge difference. I feel that as long as one is clear about the field that one wants to make a difference and one has a clear advantage in that particular field, anytime is good.
All right, but then let's talk about the very important fear. And Shilpa, you might be able to help out over here because your role on the panel is to be a financial planner as well. So, the biggest hurdle in taking such a break is the fear that you might end up ruining your finances. So, even if, as Aditya highlighted, that this needs to be a very planned break and you should make the most of it, you should definitely decide as to how you should be going up the ladder in terms of your growth and your career trajectory. But then finances also play a very important role. At what level do you think a person can be prepared to take a career break and should definitely, if it's something that's been on your mind since long and you are financially in a very comfortable position?
Yeah. Good point, Kavita. And I think, like you rightly said, what is it that you can look at to figure out if you are financially prepared to take a break? So I think the most important thing here is to look at your current living expenses and, whether if you take a break, now if your income is what has been meeting your regular expenses and all the, expenses that you incur throughout the year. So when you take that break, where is that money going to come from? So I think knowing that you have the resources in place is very important. And if you do not have the resources in place, I think figuring out what part of your existing resources you could allocate towards that, or what kind of resources you need to be building before you actually step out on this break, I think that's a very important point to look at. And I think once you have that figured out, the next step is to see, what kind of planning that you need to do around it further. So I think one important piece is that apart from the resources and the funds that you set aside for your career break, it's also important to remember that there are certain risks that can, come in the way. So when you're on a career break, your employer is not going to be around now to help you cover certain risks, such as, your high medical expenditures, such as your life, itself being at stake. So I think it's very important that you think about how you're going to cover these big risks and unforeseen expenditures that can come in the way during your career break. So I think that is one very, very important piece to look at. So to look at that, I think, having a health insurance in place is very, very important. So over and above what your employer is providing you, it's important that you take a health insurance cover of your own for yourself as well as your, dependents. That's number one. And if your employer has been also covering you for a life insurance, I think it's important that you take a term life insurance policy over and above, what your employer had provided for you. So I think doing these things on your own and making sure that you're covered for these risks is super important before you decide to step out. Because I think once you take that career break and you have the resources in place to take care of your regular expenditure, and something unforeseen happens along the way, the covers need to be in place for these risks.
Shilpa, I will come back to you with the kind of maths and calculation that's needed because a lot of people need help when it comes to budgeting. We will move on. We are joined by Nandita Gurjar, former HR head, Infosys. Hi, Nandita. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
So we had Shilpa talking about the financial planning aspect of taking a break, and Aditya Narayan also explained as to why it is a good idea to take a break if that's been on your mind, and how can you make the most of it. But tell me something, Nandita. In abroad, it's actually meant to be good if you're taking a break for maybe to pursue a passion, to travel, to explore. In India, if we are taking a break, it's not really looked upon very well. A lot of time employers think that, oh, maybe, you were just out of the job market and you might not be well versed with the kind of trends, things are moving in a different direction, and maybe you're laid back slightly. What's the kind of mindset right now when it comes to corporates thinking of taking a break? And if at all you want to take a break, is it okay to take a break and just take cut off and maybe to pursue a passion or anything on those lines which is not very career oriented? Can we do that?
So I think the times are changing. I mean, earlier, if you look at it 10 years back, if somebody said, I'm going on a break, the corporates instantly thought, the person was probably laid off and, has said, could not find another job. And that's why, he says he was on a break. But today, I think the younger generation is more financially independent. Also, they have a very high security net from their parents. And therefore, this taking a break has become it's not unheard of. Like, people could say, I took 9 months off, I went travel and came back, and, I wanted to pursue a hobby, photography, wildlife, all kinds of things. And then I decided that I need to come back, to do this. Now, there are two ways I believe a corporate can look at it. One is to say, so he doesn't need a job, which means that he could exit at any point. So is he worth the investment, right? So that's what they're thinking. But if you can show that you had a career pattern, which is, you stayed for 4 or 5 years and then sort of took a break, then I think they view it more empathetically and say, we could give him a chance. But if you are going in for a break for skill development, which says, I'm on a career track which is not really well paying, or it doesn't have a good career stream, and therefore I want to change my career stream, which requires me to do maybe a part-time job in a certain area which I want to get good at, or I want to do training of a much larger nature, which requires 6-7 months of training. If you say that, I think that is looked at very positively by corporates. So they say, oh, you went to invest in yourself, and therefore you have come back and you want to look for an opportunity in another career stream, and therefore it is something that we would definitely look for.
So in this scenario, Aditya, now going ahead on the point that Nandita also highlighted, and talking about the pay package. Now, the two types of breaks and two types of way the corporate can look at it, Nandita explained. What will be the pay package if someone takes a break on those particular criteria and comes back in the job market?
So I think traditionally when people have come back after a break, they have struggled a bit. But times have changed, like Nandita said. There is no need to compromise on the salaries that one was drawing earlier. In fact, there have been cases where somebody took a break to upskill oneself or to acquire some additional knowledge, skills. So there you come back at a package which is higher than what you were drawing earlier. I think it depends upon individual's context as well. If somebody took a break to get into a startup and the startup failed, and one is broken after the failure and is coming back. That time, one's confidence is not at its peak. And then you are trying to somehow, because of your financial situation, you are trying to settle down for anything. So, in that kind of a case, once you seem vulnerable, there are many organizations. We can discuss whether it is moral, ethical, or not. However, there are many organizations who would exploit your vulnerability and will offer you something very low salary as a beginning, just because you come across as someone who's not very confident. However, if I just turn this situation to someone who took a break to venture into a startup, the startup failed, and he has come back. But when the person is back in the job market and is saying that, hey, I am wiser, I have now much more experience and exposure to life than what I was earlier. In fact, with my experience, I should be doing a job which is a notch higher than what I was doing earlier. So one is operating from a very different realm and a different position, a mental position at that point in time. So there you are in a position to negotiate better. But having said all of this, I think individuals' financial condition also matters a lot. If somebody had some savings and all the savings are finished and one doesn't have good amount of support system, financial support system, and family at that point in time is in a bit of a desperate situation, and that support system is also pushing one to despair, then one doesn't have too many levers to really operate with. So one becomes more and more vulnerable in that situation. This is how the Indian ecosystem at this point in time operates.
What about taking a break after losing a job? Say if you're laid off and then you all of a sudden feel that I need to take a break and then just maybe rejuvenate myself or maybe upskill myself and then maybe put myself up in the job market. Is it advisable? Nandita?
You know, these as he said it's very personal. So you can't give sweeping generalizations. It's a great time to take a break and to actually ask the question on what is it that I really wanted to do in my career. But if you want to be very pragmatic, I think the first thing you need to do is to find another job. And the best time to take a career break is when you're doing very well in your career. And that's when if you've worked in an organization for many years, I think you should instead talk about getting a sabbatical, which is sort of like a safety net. You keep, and then for about 6 to 9 months, you sort of ask the question, what is it that I wanted to do, and experiment with many other things. Even a break can also mean you take a part-time job instead of a full-time, right? So it's not completely non-financial break. So those kind of experimentations can be done, and you come back. The question is, how long do you want this break to be? That determines everything. And one of the other things which happens, Kavita, is more often than not, you actually start saying, do I really want to go back to work? And that's a real dangerous spin, because once you get onto that mode of saying, I'm having a good life without all of this, if it wasn't for the financial constraints sometimes, then you have to move to something called a second career. And it's a great time to sort of think about, a second career. Today, there are, innumerable opportunities of doing different things, of following your passion. You might not be working on the same parameters of having a corporate job, like a designation, work hours, the insurance, the money, may not be that high, but it is sufficient to run your life and also, maybe cut down some expenses. And, I've seen a lot of people doing that, and most importantly, being very happy doing that.
Last part of this entire discussion, we have many aspects to talk, but then I have time constraints. And Shilpa, so be it a passion that you want to pursue, or you want to upskill yourself, you really need money. You need money for your daily life. You need money to pursue all of these things that you want to do. So how can one ensure that they have enough emergency or contingency buffer with them? They also need to budget themselves and also fund themselves for the things that they want to pursue in life. How can we do it?
Absolutely. So, Kavita, I think it's important that whoever's planning to do this just takes a pause once and tries to visualize what are all the expenses that they foresee that would happen, if they were to take this career break. So, once you've figured out what those expenses are, what would be some of them that are recurring and most basic expenses that you just cannot live without, like paying your house rent, your utility bills, your food and groceries, maybe your children's school fees. So, what are those absolute non-negotiable expenses? And what are some of those which are your wants? And, those are luxuries that you can possibly live without. So, try to, sort of bucket your expenses, figure out how often you're going to have those expenses, and create a budget for yourself, depending on how many months it is that you want to take this break for. I would also say take a buffer because, like Nandita was saying, figure out what the time period is, that you want to take this break for, but also make sure that you account for a little bit of a buffer that when you go back, it may take some time to find the right kind of job for yourself. Once you've done that and once you figure out the expenses, create a fund for that. You can call it your career break fund or call it what you may, but have that fund which is not your contingency fund. So I think contingency is something that should be separate, which is for unforeseen expenses. So say, for example, there are some out of pocket health expenditure expenses that you may have. For that, make sure you have your contingency fund in place, and your car or your washing machine needs servicing. I think those are areas where your unforeseen expenses can, come out of your contingency fund, but do not touch your career break fund for your contingency expenses. I think that's the most important thing here. And of course, make sure that you've taken a health insurance policy.
Definitely.
That is very, very important. And don't forget that every health insurance policy has a waiting period. So, it shouldn't be that you're buying your health insurance policy and going into your sabbatical and suddenly your career break,
Right.
and then you realize that it's the waiting period and I can't really do much with this policy that I've availed. So, take that into account as well when you're buying your health insurance.
All right,
And
so that's a very crucial checklist, but unfortunately my time is up for this particular segment. Thank you so much, all of you, for being on the show and guiding our viewers on taking a career break. And on that note, let's take a quick break, and post that we'll be answering your financial planning queries.